Hey everybody, welcome back. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we're here now, and that's really all that matters. So today I've got Peter, who will be our wonderful moderator, and also Isaiah, and we're going to be talking about stuff and things. So Isaiah, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
So for anybody wondering, yes, this is a different email account just in case it looks a little weird. Yeah, I'm 17. I'm still in high school. I just actually today picked up my senior schedule a little earlier. I took a couple college classes, nothing that special. I'm not claiming to know everything. My knowledge has, boundaries, but I'm gonna try to explain things the best I can, and forgive me if I try to get a little, you know, heated or into it as we go. Which I'm not gonna get violent or nothing like that. I'm gonna try to keep everything, nice, simple discussion. So yeah, I've been expecting this, waiting for it, hoping for it, and I'm glad finally being able to, you know, get it right. So yeah.
Indeed. So I guess to jump right into it, because we've uh, what so we really wanted to, as near as I understand it, talk about evolution, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. We don't really have time to, pick and choose whatever. So we can just jump right into it. So how do you want to do this? I can ask you a couple questions or in general about evolution, or you can try to explain the best you can now. I guess I'll ask questions which will help further the explanation because I don't want to assume anything, about what you say you
That's fine.
believe in stuff
You
before.
can ask me
So
questions if you want.
okay. All right. So well, first I would like I would like you just to simply define because well I know I guess we can start off with some simple definitions like science. Like I'm sure you've heard this a million times from other debates. Science is defined as knowledge. So if I ever say something about like science, you may be thinking I'm referring to the scientific method. That's not necessarily what I always mean. When I say something reference to like evolution, for instance, it's more of to the evolution, the theory of evolution, because change over time. That's you can't refute that. You see that everywhere. You always see change over time. Truth, yes, we have truth. If we don't have truth, how could that be true? So just I guess I would ask you to start basically on what you believe, and then I'll just start asking some questions. So go ahead and give me the gist of what you believe. To like what extent the theory of evolution is valid, what extent it happened, and how often it can happen. Is it are we still in it? Stuff like that.
Okay, so to start, I wouldn't say science is knowledge. If you plopped a biology textbook right in front of me, I wouldn't say, well, this is a big book of, or this is, science. Science is really more of the method itself that seeks to understand the world. Um, if you just give me a fact, I'm not really going to call that science, even though I would say that is knowledge. Um, but what evolution is generally defined as, oh, bye, Joan. See you later. Um, as change in allele frequencies in a population over generations, or as our friend RJ likes to define it, is natural branching, common descent. I think is what he says. Uh, and so basically, we can observe this in real time uh, and we can infer its existence in the fossil record. And so we can compare. We know that we are, we take for granted that we are related to other humans, like our parents, our cousins, etc. And then we can just take how we understand that we are related to them, which is through genetics and morphology, and we can extrapolate that backwards, and we can easily figure out that we are related to all other humans, which is why you have companies like 23andMe and Ancestry.com who look at your genes and they find, okay, uh, where did your ancestors come from? One of the ways they do that is they look at these things called mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, which are basically these segments of DNA that are often correlated with geographic areas. And so that's how they can, in part, trace your heritage. And so we just keep applying that method. We look at the genes of other organisms and we start building this branching tree where we see that we are more closely related to chimps and all other primates than we are to all other mammals, more closely related to all mammals than we are to reptiles, etc. And so, yeah, absolutely, evolution has been occurring as long as there are alleles to act on in a population. It's still occurring today. There are actually studies that have been published showing directional selection in humans, some fairly interesting ones. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, okay, so kind of the basic gist. Now I've got some questions. I'm not sure which way you want. Do you want me to answer the similar thing, like as in like we both answer the same thing, or do you want me just to like continue to like ask you questions, or
I mean, you can say what you think instead if you want. You can tell us that.
okay? Well, I believe that there are genetic boundaries, as in there. Well, I guess I think I've told you guys this, over Twitter before, but like the what is it, myostatin in our bone or in our muscles and our bodies that prohibit them from growing too big or too large. Like you're never gonna get a dog the size of like an elephant. You're never gonna get a dog super tiny that we don't already see today. I believe there are genetic boundaries, and to my knowledge and what I've heard and understand, that evolution, like the theory of evolution, claims that these genetic boundaries can be bypassed by mutations, and which is true, but to the extent is a very improbable. And I understand improbable isn't impossible, but you need to take into account the probability of getting multiple mutations at almost virtually the same time, multiple mutations in the same animal. And I understand that it's supposed to be a very slow process over millions and millions of years, but a mutation too big or too small or like out of the ordinary, for instance, happening naturally, like, well, you see, I'm sure you've heard of the chickens with like teeth or whatever they've recently done on, or whatever they recently mutated. But to produce that offspring, like how long do you think that one like, I guess, mutation prototype or whatever is going to survive? Because it needs to find something. It needs to find a mate. It needs to have produce offspring to create what you guys would say a population. And then a population can't change unless you have, like the same mutation is not going to occur throughout the whole population. So the way I kind of look at it is, when we were created, and I make no regrets about stating the Bible, as there's many things, like, because it's also the viewpoint, which I'm going to get to later. But so as soon as we were created, as soon as God was created, like for instance, like they just started saying this about human ethnicity and race, is that there's really only one race. The way I believe it works, because evolution and creation is kind of backwards.
Isaiah, can I jump in real quick, because and now we're going off on what we call a gish gallop. We now have so many topics in the short moment that you've been talking that it will be almost impossible for Jackson to answer. So I would.
No, I do have one of those things. I'll go with the first one, and that's fine. We can just stick with the first thing that was brought up, if that's okay.
You cut off for a little bit. You're saying just well, yeah. I'm not gonna present all these. I'm talking about in general, like what we're like the aspect of evolution. And I guess what, let's just focus on what's kind to kind or species to species,
okay,
or whatever.
That's fine.
Why don't you focus on that? Okay, because that's like. So you said, yeah, it was changed in frequency, and I bring up 1 point mutation. I'm going to bring up my point, which I believe is, when we were created, we had all of the genetic variability, and as generations go down, we're not gaining we're not gaining any new information. We're just simply repositioning, I should say, because like our DNA is repositioning, which gives us variation in animals, which gives us smaller animals, because it's repositioning. And throughout generations, you are going to lose some of that. You're going to lose some of that information that it's able to use to do that. Which is why you can get from two like short-haired dogs, you can get a long-haired dog, or vice versa. That's what I say. And then I'll let you say what you think about the same thing.
Okay, so I think there are really two topics here, and you kind of brought up change from one kind of organ. Kind isn't a scientific term, but I see what I know what you mean. Um, and then uh, increasing gene or mutations, and which create new genes, things like that. Um, so we do actually have what you're talking about when you say we have the inherent variability. We actually don't. We have documented loads and loads and loads of examples of mutations causing new structures or functions to appear even within human lifetime. For instance, there's a family in Milan, Italy, that had a single point mutation in the gene that creates this protein called apolipoprotein A1, which helps you metabolize cholesterol. And the single point mutation changed an arginine to a cysteine, to amino acids. And so now this family is able to better digest or metabolize cholesterol, which means that they're less likely to get heart disease. That didn't already exist in them. It had to be physically changed by mutation, by single point mutation. A similar example is, well, I mean, another example of where we can see this sort of thing occur is I may or may not have mentioned on Twitter we have and I know of course people on YouTube aren't going to go through Twitter conversations. So another example that I often like to point to is the water strider genus Ragavalia. Now, what happened in this species of this genus of Ragavalia is it had duplications in two different genes, Geisha and mother of Geisha, and basically this allowed and mutations accrued in these genes and allowed them to develop these novel structures, which were propeller fans on their limbs. And because they gained these propeller fans, they were allowed to invade a new environment that the old other Ragavalia could not. And so this is a direct example of a mutation that has aided their survival, is beneficial, is an adaptive mutation. And so we see things like these a lot. And natural selection, sexual selection, etc., the different mechanisms of evolution, they act on these mutations, which we more or less subjectively called beneficial. And these things can accrue in populations, and populations can split and become new species. Again, all this is observed. It's both observed in the lab and in field, and we can see it occurring in the fossil record. And so it's as far as new structures or functions coming into being, we have quite a few examples of those. So that's not really so much of an issue.
Okay, and now let me ask you: do you think all natural selection or all beneficial, or do you think all mutations in general are going to be beneficial?
No, the vast majority of mutations are neutral. They cause neither harm nor help to the individual because we have a lot of sections of DNA that really either don't do anything, and lots of our amino acids can be specified by more than one codon. And so if you change, I think like in leucine, if you change its UUA, I think, if you change that to UUG, it's still leucine. So the mutation didn't do anything. But most of them will be neutral. They won't harm or help the organism.
Okay. And so the way I see it is when you have that genetic variability, I think, well, obviously, like, and let me just say like short-haired dog or long-haired dog, because that's like easy way to explain it. The long-haired dogs in a hotter environment will not survive as well as a short-haired dog. Same thing, and vice versa in a cold or whatever, or any animal that maybe develops like a semi-aquatic animal or whatever. They may, depending on the environment and to whatever extent, because like I don't study to the extent, I don't really know to the extent. I know there is an extent, but I don't know what to extent. But depending on whatever extent, those animals eventually might die out, and in a way, as you guys say, adapt. Yes, they'll adapt because it's the living creatures that will survive, outlive the others because of that thing. And let me see. You said you also mentioned the when you mentioned the other mutation in the was that were you referring to like a willful ability for mutation, like or what were you
I'm
referring to
sorry.
the?
What do you mean?
Oh, hang on. I was saying the one mutation you said. What was the example you used? The like the second. I forgot what you called it. It was
Well, the
what was your
first
second
one,
example?
the second example was the duplication of two genes in the water strider genus Ragavalia.
Yes, yeah, yeah, that one. Okay, so the duplication of that. Do you believe that was willful by chance? Do you think any other what is that creature has that ability as well, or
Has what ability?
like the duplication for? Do you think the success rate, I guess, for implementing that mutation is going to be equal to that specific creature, and rather than another one?
Well, I mean, gene duplications occur, or whole genome duplications occur fairly often in organisms. There are lots of examples of them. Heck, there was a whole genome duplication event in primates. And so, I mean, it
Okay.
occurs with fairly often. There's another example with the flower Slender Clarkia uh, had a gene duplication in one of its pigment genes, and so it developed a new pigment. There was the crawfish, the marbled crawfish, Procambarus virginalis, that underwent a whole genome duplication, and so now it's asexual because it reproduces parthenogenetically. It's triploid now instead of diploid.
Okay. And do you think that do you think well do you think the survival rate you accept that the survival rates for a mutation among species like the crab for instance being asexual, it wouldn't really necessarily need it wouldn't necessarily need with gene duplication wouldn't necessarily need a another mate or whatever to reproduce. Do you think the survival rate of a mutated animal or creature is is fairly slim, or would you admit that, or would you say it's like when we're talking about in general, we're talking about in general for one species. What do you think the survival rate without like furthering themselves in that mutation? How often do you think that occurs?
Are you saying, like, if they have a mutation, are they generally more or less likely to survive?
Yeah, survive and reproduce.
Well, that depends. That's why we categorize mutations as harmful, neutral, or beneficial. Generally, mutations that are neutral, which is the majority of mutations, they just don't do anything, and so your survivability is not affected at all. Harmful mutations we call them harmful because they tend to decrease your ability to survive and pass on your genes to offspring, and beneficial ones generally increase your chances of survivability. And so it just depends on what sort of mutations you inherit.
Okay.
Um,
Um.
I think to put it in short, if a mutation is beneficial in your particular environment, it will be passed on. If it
Indeed.
isn't, if it isn't, it won't be.
That's
And
basically what we call
that's basically the natural selection. So if due to a mutation you struggle to survive, you will be less likely to pass on that particular mutation because you're going to die off earlier and have less
Okay.
offspring.
And have you got have there do you are you aware or do you know is there any example of a creature passing on successfully a mutation and then once again doing the same thing to
I
like the
mean, we
next
have
level?
lots of examples of mutations being passed on. In the human apolipoprotein A1, we've managed to trace the single point mutation back to the first individual in the early 1900s, if I remember correctly, at or late 1800s. And so, yeah, I mean, we recognize that he passed on that mutation to his progeny, and they all inherited it, and they are still passing it down to their progeny to this very day.
Are they like the next leveling their mutation, like further evolving? I guess you could say after that one or whatever.
I mean, we're a constant. Every generation has variations in it. The ones, I mean, the genes of or the alleles of the children who are a progeny of that man in the early 1900s are going to have slightly different alleles than he did because of the variations that have accrued over the generations. Probably going to be very, very slight differences, but be there. Yeah, nonetheless.
And I agree with that. There's the variation, slight difference. Clearly, if you can take a look back at common answer or what you guys would call common ancestry, earlier humans, you can see even the difference between you and me or your grandparents or whatever. You can say we're a little different, which is why I mentioned like not the gaining of new information, but the losing or variation of the information we already have, which is why you know the Human Genome Project, and then there was another secular organization after that. So because they said what 90% of the DNA is like junk DNA, or we don't need that, or it's useless.
I don't know
there.
about I don't know about 90. Well, they didn't say it was useless. Junk DNA isn't necessarily useless, which is something that's I think confused a lot of people over the years.
Which is why I forgot the name of that. I could I could, but it doesn't really matter to look it up. But it was a project after that, and then they furthered. Okay, so it was 90%.
Are you talking about ENCODE? Are you talking about ENCODE? Is that what you're referring?
Possibly. I think I know I heard it like last week. I think so, and it was like in which they declared it was like 80% of human DNA is actually all used for a purpose they found out.
Yeah, that was ENCODE. So basically, what they did, and here's why their results really aren't accepted. I mean, they were accepted. It's okay. Let me explain it this way. What they did was they said if something is transcribed, they called it biochemically functional, which is a large part of the genome. And so it's like 85% or something like that. And so it's not useful to think of DNA in that way. Technically it's correct, but it's not useful. It'd be like, I guess a way I could sort of analogize it is if you asked me, we went up to a car and you said what part of it works, and I said the whole car works. You're like, okay, but what part runs the car? And I said, oh, the whole car runs. It's like, well, clearly you want me to tell you that the engine is the part that does all the heavy lifting in the car. It's not that. It's like the bumper is not running the car, right? Technically it's correct. You would say the car does run, but it's not useful to describe it that way.
Well, I know what you mean, but couldn't those what they declared as junk DNA in the Genome Project, which was later said as useful, be the variation pieces for the next generation or for reproduction or
I don't understand what you mean. I mean, there are some parts in the junk DNA that are very likely part or doing something that we just don't know what it is yet, but it's unlikely to be a very large percentage of them based on what we currently know about DNA.
For use to further generations and stuff, like for what? Yeah, like I agree. We probably don't know everything that DNA can do. It's like a language basically, and we each have individual parts. But then that's also the same thing as saying.
Hold on. Can I just jump in? It's nothing like a language.
DNA.
Oh,
DNA is very much like a language.
No. Hold on.
Wait, guys.
Hold on. DNA. So creationists say DNA is like a language. They're incorrect. It's nothing like a language. It's chemical reaction. It's chemical reactions. If you want to describe DNA, it's chemical reactions. One reaction will cause another reaction, will cause another reaction. That's how it works.
Okay, so what if we called the
if
letters
you want
reactions?
to explain it in layman's terms, I think that's a lot better way to explain it, because it isn't like a language.
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Isaiah.
Uh, well, I was saying, okay, so for what if you call just letters reactions? What if you call, okay, so a letter tells you a little something that like it has a certain purpose in the English alphabet. You know what a letter stands for in a language, which is why they commonly refer the two. You get different letters, different proteins, different chemical reactions, as you would say. You combine them differently, and you get a different function. That's why
Yes,
they call it a DNA, because different
that's
functions will vary.
that's exactly why DNA is not a language.
Okay. Well,
There are no letters in
well,
DNA.
Isaiah, what is the point of your argument, or your what you're
Uh,
saying?
Oh,
What is the point?
I was just saying about the DNA being able to be used for, like different things. Like you can get offspring with DNA variation. The reason why that's why we called it a language, because it's like a language as in being, different proteins, different things combining, and different amino acids combining into
Okay.
a DNA, which can be used for whatever. Which is why they said 80% is used as junk, just because. But there is a lot of availability. I don't think necessarily variation has a link to. I don't know. I don't know if you guys claim different. If it has a link to, what you would call ancestry, besides like, what is it, intermediate, reproduction, or like
Well,
what you call related.
you recognize that offspring are born with inherited variations, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Some of those variations are going to be harmful, some are going to be neutral, some are going to be beneficial, right?
I'm sure.
Okay. And so this is in a wild population, not in a human population. Nature is going to act on those and weed out the bad ones and retain the good or likely neutral ones, right?
Yeah, well,
For the sake of argument, we can just ignore the neutral ones. We'll just say there are only bad ones and only good ones. So over time,
sure.
you are going to accrue the useful ones, and the offspring that are born with harmful ones are going to get cut out, right?
Oh, eventually they'll die out. Doesn't mean they'll completely, but they could eventually.
Right. Okay. So, have you studied in school what happens when you get separate subpopulations of the same species?
Yeah, I guess I heard they can go different directions, which is
Okay.
why. Yeah, go ahead.
So, you have the same species, this one population, and it splits in two, and one decides to go north, and the other decides to go south, right? For instance.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
So, okay, so they're going to. So when they go those different directions, they are still going to continue to have genetic variation that is passed on to their offspring, and those variations are still going to be affected by the environment, right? Nature is still going to weed out the bad ones and keep the good ones, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
In a way.
right. So that goes on long enough, and eventually you get to the point where what was once one population, these two subpopulations can no longer interbreed with each other should they ever meet each other again. That's called speciation. That's according to the general biological species concept. That is speciation.
Well, yeah, yeah. Like, well, for instance, well, that's the thing. The definitions are have been very usefully defined by creationists in a way, because you can't. Well, I like using the examples for dogs. You can't interbreed a Chihuahua with a like pit bull. It's just not going to work. I don't know. You could probably move your way back. You get some professional breeders. You get
Actually,
like a medium dog.
actually, I think you can.
Well, I'm sure, yeah, but you're going to get them up, which is why we say they're still in a way related, because they're still dogs. They're still the
Well,
same kind.
all okay. Well, first of all, dogs. When I say dog, I think of what we are thinking of is man-made. These are man-made animals. Dogs were bred from gray wolves into what Canis what is it, Canis lupus domesticus or whatever, familiaris. I think it's familiaris.
Yeah, I think
Um,
it's Moliares as well. Yeah.
I think the cat is Felis domesticus. So you get Canis lupus familiaris or Canis familiaris, whichever way, because I've heard it both ways. But they're all still extremely closely. They're all more closely related to each other genetically than they are to any other species. Right? If we were to take a genetic test of a Great Dane and a Pit Bull and a Chihuahua, we would see that they're all more closely related to each other than they are to the coyote, for instance, Canis latrans.
Well, yeah, but that's that kind of like interpretation of if they are related or not, just because they simply share many of the same qualities or many of the same DNA factors or genetic factors. That's kind of sketchy, because then people can say, humans are related to bananas and stuff like that. That's what I don't.
Now, what's wrong
That's
with
what
that?
I don't really understand.
Humans,
I
humans
get.
are related to bananas.
So let's start simple. So remember how I pointed out how we have genetic similarity, or I don't think I pointed out how we have genetic similarities with all other humans on the planet.
Right.
So yep, that we are genetically similar to all other humans on planet Earth.
I'm sorry, you cut out.
You accept that we are genetically related to all other humans on Earth? Yes
Yeah.
or no?
Yes.
Okay. So why? Why do you accept that the genetic similarities among all humans indicates relatedness?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. They are. It's not just based. I wouldn't see. This is where I'm like but I can observe, and what I can tell you is that there are many different qualities than from humans that we can tell from animals. A list of reasons why. We have morals, we have souls, and that's a different discussion. But we have a lot more, I guess you can call similar traits, and that's not just similar traits, because yeah, you can say a monkey looks like a human, so and then their genetics, and then their DNA is somewhat closely interpreted. Like, you've heard of the 98% chimp and human DNA similarities, right?
Yes, I actually just read a paper yesterday that was comparing bonobo and chimp and human single copy autosomal regions, showing that that bonobos are most closely related to chimps, and then they are both related to us, or we are sister to both of them.
Okay, and do you realize that in some of these studies they virtually cut out duplicated information in either of them, and then they root out like repeated information, which gives them that more accurate number? Because reality
Sometimes.
is like, they
Sometimes.
do. That's why, and I forgot the real actual DNA similarity between them. I think it was like somewhere in 68 or plus or whatever available. That's how they determine these similarities, because they'll cut out repeated different, because it's clear they have arms, they have fingers. We need to have arms. We need to have somewhat similar genetics. We need to have somewhat. We have all organs. We all have hearts, blood, bones. We need to have some sort of similarity, because we not just because we look alike, not necessarily because we're related, but because we in a sense we all have the same living, breathing qualities as an animal.
So why do we have those qualities?
Well, because God gave us them.
So would you say that the tiger and the lion have the same qualities because they were created separately?
The tiger and the lion?
Yes.
Oh, well, they have similar like the tigers. Let me think. Those were. I forgot that they. I know they classified them as something. They have similar qualities, though. Don't necessarily mean relatedness. I mean, yeah, you can say. Well, I'm talking about and I'm not. I'm talking about genetically. Yeah, not necessarily. I shouldn't say similar qualities, because I think you're getting the wrong idea. I'm talking about attribute or living, like things we need to survive, things they need to survive, like whatever animal needs to produce.
So do you think that the tiger and the lion are related to each other? Are they descended from a common ancestor who also had their same feature, or who also had a number of their same features, all the features they share.
I think so. Let
So
me.
the lion and the tiger, they are descended from a common ancestor who also shares all their same features, or all the features they have in common, I should say. So
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Yeah. They're like
yes,
they. Yeah. Well.
okay.
There's you can say they share them the same.
So
The
is the mountain lion also related to the lion and the tiger? Do they all stem from one common ancestor who had their shared features? This is the mountain lion, and the tiger.
uh. I would say yes. I would say yes. But listen, not from this necessarily the same. Well, I guess
Okay, no, I would
if you
agree. It
consider the
probably
first
wouldn't be
two,
the same common
they
ancestor.
could be different.
Okay, I would agree with that. So would you say the house cat is also related to the mountain lion, the tiger, and the lion? Are
From what
house
I would,
cats also related to them?
yeah, from what I would say, and as in related, like you realize, I'm sure you guys believe that they can, that evolution can, or I would say microevolution can stem from different directions. So you would get a normal dog or a normal cat or feline, a normal one, and then you just go smaller, 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 and you can also breed bigger, 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 like
Can
that.
I
From the
can I can I throw in a question,
Oh,
Jackson?
I was about to. What
Okay.
question? I mean, I have a direction I'm going with this.
Okay. Never mind me.
Okay.
I'm back.
No, I mean you can ask. We'll come back to it, Peter. Okay.
No, it can wait. It can wait.
Okay. So we've established that the house cat, the mountain lion, the tiger, and the lion all stem from probably different common ancestors, but at some point they all had a common ancestor.
From what I understand, from what I
Okay.
don't, yeah, from what I
Okay.
know.
Would you say the hyena is also related to all four of them?
I don't think so.
Why not?
I'm not sure. From the different, well, not just outer appearances, but from different shapes. Like I said, I don't study in these particular genetic codes, these different genetic like walls or boundaries, I should say. But when it crosses the line, like for instance, what we can do and what we cannot do. Okay, so what we could do is virtually take a big feline and slowly, slowly breed it back, breed it back, breed it back. If you get a professional breeder, at the end of his lifetime, he might, and 1,000 years is a long time for these different.
Not really. It's
Well,
actually a
yeah,
pretty
you can
short
get
amount of time.
professional. Well, it's been indoctrinated to believe that, but if you can get a professional breeder in with a certain type of animal and get them from one to another real
Okay,
quick,
but
no matter a couple
most changes
generations.
don't occur through breeders; they occur through natural selection.
Right.
And
Right.
okay, so what if I were to tell you that the hyena is actually more closely related genetically to all the cats than to anything else?
Well, how would you determine that? You tell me how you would determine
The
that.
same way we determine that all humans are related to each other. The same way we determine that humans are related to apes, that all apes are related to each other.
Okay, so tell me then. If you had a human, all right, and then you had another human, and they wanted to find out if this child was their daughter or whatever, or was their ancestor. Actually, let's just say that their relative, their great grandmother, whatever. All right, and then they did the test on a ape. Do you think they'll determine? Yeah, this is you guys. No matter how close, no matter how close. Do you think they're gonna say, yeah, that you are related? Is it the same today to see human relation and human and animal relation? Do you believe that's the same?
I'm very confused what you're saying. If you compare the sequences of DNA, which even the video that you sent me on Twitter acknowledges, in which I have actually a number of creationist articles from Answers in Genesis who also acknowledge that we share a high amount of similarities with chimps. You compare the DNA and you can see that we are indeed related to each other. This is not really a question among biologists and even among most creationists. They recognize that we are most closely related genetically to chimps. They choose, however.
So where does that?
Do what?
Well, I was going to ask. So how does that, however, determine relatedness as in common ancestry?
So we look at humans
I
and
know,
we
I know.
compare the DNA, and we can see that humans are, and again, it's really an arbitrary distinction because the differences between a lion and a house cat are far surpass the differences between a chimp and a human. Very far. Um, they're separated by many millions of years more than we're separated from chimps, and we use the exact same method. It's all about comparing DNA because DNA doesn't lie to us. It also it even allows us to make falsifiable predictions, which we have. We have made verified predictions based solely on the concept of common ancestry with other apes.
Okay, now I had a feeling that this is going to go back in a circle because you're saying the same way you can see if two humans are related to humans alone, not a human in different
And
species
how
or
do you do
animal.
it? How do you determine that humans are related to each other?
Well, you use the strict genetic codes, what we see
Okay.
in DNA, but you
So
can't do the same thing to
how
an
do we
animal because
determine
animals are different.
how do we determine that the bonobo is related to the chimp? The bonobo is a different species of chimp. They're pygmy chimps. How do we determine that they're related?
Well, you have to well, 'cause that's the thing. I kind of I believe that they're every monkey or ape or chimp were never related in the first place. I mean, you might get some variations like different breeds I would call them, but I wouldn't say they're all necessarily related unless you can see related. But you don't cross the boundaries of mutation to figure that out.
So how do we determine that the bonobo is related to the chimp? How do we determine that? Do you accept that that
By
is in fact
looking
the
at
case?
by looking at the similarities in DNA and not crossing the line of mutation.
What is the boundary of mutation? Can you demonstrate that for me?
The boundary of mutation. Well, we see that. We see that in breeders and people or in animal breeds when they have a breed, they always produce their same thing. They never reproduce anything else other than their own same species or kind. It may be a different color, maybe a different kind of already installed genetics, but they're not going to get a new genetic from mutation, and we can see that.
So even though I already explained earlier that we have seen the origin of new structures and genes through mutations, as I already demonstrated.
Can I
You
jump
see,
in?
well,
Can I jump in real quick?
Okay, go ahead, Peter.
Isaiah, are you aware of the silver fox experiment?
the silvers. No, I'm not.
Okay,
Yes, I am.
I'll make it very brief. In Russia, silver foxes were bred for their fur, but they were really aggressive animals. So what they tried to do is take the most docile animals and breed those in order to get to a point where they would have more docile silver foxes. And what happened was that the entire appearance of the animal changed. They grew floppy ears, they grew different tails, they grew different fur, and they became more docile. But now we ended up with an animal that looks like a dog. It's not a dog because it's still a fox, because its ancestors were foxes. But
Yeah.
if I would show you that particular animal, you would say it's a dog and not a fox.
Not by based on looks. No. Yeah, that's why I say you can't go off of looks.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
people,
So
I would agree with that.
like
my
for
question.
instance,
Okay. Hold on. My question would be: you accept that we can go through DNA and tell whether or not you are related to a particular human and how closely you are related to a human. I mean, DNA is used in paternal cases,
Right.
to find out who
to that
the father was.
extent.
Yes, we can
Sure.
also through DNA find out if someone is your, let's say your cousin, or your second cousin, or your third cousin, twice removed. So, how far can we go back in your ancestry when to get to a point where your ancestors are no longer your ancestors?
That's like a point I was literally just going to bring up. How far back? Because most of these datings are just within a couple generations, a couple, changes
I
in
think
our
you
DNA.
misunderstood him. I think you misunderstood Peter. The point he's trying to make
Yeah.
is that you can't ever get past your ancestors. Okay. We know we share a very close common ancestry with chimps through the same method that we know we share close common ancestry with all other humans, albeit a much closer
Okay.
common history. And so I'd have to ask you,
Okay.
can you show me genetically saying breeders breed the dogs and so they're not, they're still dogs. We still have all the characteristics of all other primates. When you describe all the characteristics shared by all primates, you can't help but describe humans as well. Okay, the same
What is
goes
it?
for when. I'm sorry.
So what are you asking?
So what? Where's the evidence that there is some? Okay, let me rephrase it.
Okay,
Why is it you think that we can do this for cats but not for humans and chimps?
Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay. So because when you're doing it with humans, you are starting off with a ape and you're going to a human. When you're doing it with a feline or any other thing, a dog or something, you can do it with what you can see what is in between. Because when they do it to humans, they do it with quick changes. Like 1 or 2 generations. Throughout generations, you're going to get someone who has more melanin in their skin, stuff like that. You're seeing it through the generation. You cannot jump past those transitional fossils with genetic and just guess your way into it. That takes belief. That's not.
I don't understand what you mean by
that. Which
I'm saying you cannot.
Isaiah, which would be correct if we weren't apes. We are still classified as being apes.
We have all the characteristics that all other apes have.
Okay, that's my point. Where is the genetic? Where can you test the genetics of a transitional ape/human ancestor, whatever? Where can you test that? Or can you?
You can't really test.
The same way you can test whether or not your father is your father. It's the same test.
Okay, you can't test a fossil because the DNA breaks down after a certain time period. Although in some cases, like Neanderthals, we can actually test their DNA and we can see that they are in fact a different species from us, but we had limited interbreeding with them in Europe. So in some very rare cases we can, very recent cases, but we can't test the DNA of a fossil that was around 5 million years ago, even though we do have a very nice succession of fossils. But I'm still interested in why is it that you think we have to test the fossils' DNA? Why is it we can't test only the living things?
Well, that's the same thing with saying, why can't you test if you or a random person in the street on New York are related? To what extent? You're not going to be able to figure that out.
You can't.
You're not.
Actually.
And Peter. Well, no, you can test you're all humans. Yeah, you can test we all came from. Like, have you heard of the Adam gene or the black
gene? Actually, Isaiah. Actually, you can.
Yeah, you can test where this person's ancestry is. You can test your own ancestry. You can show where your ancestors.
So you can test how many. So you can test how many fathers that person, like father to father. You can test how many generations in between, and tell me what the generations in between were like between that person and whenever you two were.
Probably not the exact number of generations, but you can show relatedness. You can show, for instance, that this person is less related to you than your brother is or your first cousin. And that's the point. The point is that we can show when we genetically test chimps that they are more closely related to us than gorillas are, and that gorillas are more closely related to us than orangutans are, and etc. And you can do that.
Well, okay.
I think I could clarify it just a little bit more. So, Isaiah, you have siblings, right?
Yes, one generation away.
Yeah. Okay. One generation away. With siblings, I mean you have brothers and sisters. brothers or brother.
Yes. I
Okay.
just brothers.
Okay.
4 brothers.
Okay. Okay. So we can determine through DNA whether or not your brother is your brother. To do that, we don't need the DNA of your mother or your father. Do you accept that?
Sure. Yes, because it's in a close time zone. It's a close like one
Okay.
generation away.
We can also do the same thing between you and your uncle, which is another generation away. And we
Fairly.
still wouldn't need your mother's DNA to do that.
Okay, fairly. And would you be able to do the same thing and tell me,
And we
all
could
the
and we could still do the same between you and your great 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 grandfather, and we still wouldn't need all the DNA in between. Would you accept that?
roughly? I know where you're headed. I mean, but by similarity, you mean you can tell me what
It's
my
not.
father's DNA or his father's DNA until up there? Can you tell the in between, or can you just
You
tell
don't
me?
have to be able to
What you
tell
mean?
every single in between thing.
Oh,
It's about setting organisms as more or less closely related to each other. We don't have to know.
oh,
We don't have to know, for instance, your mother's DNA to, if we test your grandmother's DNA, we don't have to know your mother's DNA. It's like we don't have to have every single uh, intermediate in there for the data to already paint a pretty
okay.
conclusive picture of what we
So
see.
So you can just assume that there had to have been. You can just assume. Are you going to admit that it's just an assumption that we are related when you say you see the
No,
DNA and you
it's not.
interpret it as related,
It's
but
not.
you don't have. So
It's
is
not
that
an
the only
assumption
proof?
because we
It,
can test. Oh, hold on, Peter. We can test both of your parents and you and see that you are in fact related to your parents and to your siblings, and we can test. We can see that uh, traits are inherited, that alleles are inherited. So that's not an assumption. That's observation, and then we can apply this and make predictions on it, which we verified, such as the human chromosome 2. It was predicted in humans before it was ever discovered. It's just one of a number of predictions that have been made based on the concept of common ancestry. And so, no, in no way is it an assumption. These are verified predictions we can make using our model. There are no.
it's evidence based. That's the opposite of an assumption.
So you guys saying that is the only proof or evidence, as you would call it, for that specific event happening? So interpretation, and then looking at apparently millions of years between. And wait, when you're saying apes, you're talking about common ancestor, right? You're not talking
Talking
about literal apes we see today in
about what?
humans, right?
Common
You're not
ancestor?
talking about apes that we see today to humans. You're talking about common ancestor.
I mean, we are related to
No, I'm
other.
asking. A common
But
ancestor to other.
I
Okay,
think
okay,
I mean,
no,
our
just
common ancestor with chimps lived about 6 million years ago. So, yeah, they're not around anymore. They're long gone.
so okay, and there you go. Okay, so so it's more of a good analogy to say to what is it? Compare your like a human's to his cousin, and then you're saying you're doing the same thing to a human along with the other cousin because you don't got the mother or the link between them. You just see that and you claim you see how they are related to the same thing.
Sort of. It's imagine that. I mean, we would say we are cousins with all other life on Earth to varying degrees. We are not. Well, we are cousins to the chimps and cousins to gorillas. We can see that we are more closely related to chimps. They're a closer cousin to us than gorillas are. But gorillas are also more closely related, are also more close cousins than orangutans are. And so while we can't test the genetics of common ancestors, even if, I mean, somehow we had, every fossil, which we don't, we'd be up to our eyeballs in fossils if everything
Okay,
fossilized.
so also, do you think you can test a gorilla and his mother, for instance, or like an animal and his mother, or whatever is offspring?
Yeah.
Like the same way humans determine if they're family related, or do you think you can do that the same way that people find out,
Yes,
if
it
they are
happens.
related? Okay, so you can do that to animals too.
Yeah, that's how pedigrees are determined.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it does
So
happen.
and you're saying there is no distinction of that same method used between millions or whatever years, millions of years between generation from generation.
Fundamentally, no. It's all just a matter of comparing your sequences of genes,
Okay,
sequences
so
of
do you think
nucleotides.
so do you think you'll get a fairly accurate result of from if I went to someone in a different country, for instance, and we compare them, do you think you'll get a fairly accurate result? Because that's only a couple hundred. That's only like maybe a couple thousand generations or
I mean,
so. Do you think you're going to get an accurate result?
that's what some companies do, like Ancestry.com. So yeah, I'd say it's fairly accurate.
They can
Okay,
track
and
your
where does it end?
they can
It's
track
just
your ancestors over continents, so
That
they
that's
can they can tell you where your ancestors came from, if your
right.
ancestors came
That's what
from
I was
Asia or Africa
right.
or
Exactly. That's what I was telling you earlier, Isaiah, with the mitochondrial DNA haplogroups. That's exactly what Peter was describing. Is they can trace your ancestry geographically.
well,
That's
that's what
what.
I was. Yeah, well, that's what I was brought up the Adam gene or the mitochondrion Eve. It brings us back. It links us all humans back to two humans, or back to two
Uh,
who.
what you guys would call
hold
humans.
on, hold on, hold on. I think you're misunderstanding. Okay. We
Well,
all humans share a common ancestor that lived about 300,000 years ago or so. The most recent common ancestor of all living humans, uh, live or for males, which is Y chromosome Adam. You could call him Y chromosome Bob for all it doesn't really matter. Uh, Adam was just a name; they were being funny. Um, but
so okay, so do you think?
this is tracing the Y chromosome, the patrilineal line among all living humans, and it goes back over 100,000 years ago.
Can I jump in real quick, because now he's bringing up mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam. So you accept mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam. Is that correct, Isaiah?
Yeah, but not just that based
Okay.
on.
Okay. Hold
I'm
on.
asking, do you see that in apes?
Isaiah, hold on. How far, how long was it between mitochondrial Eve living and Y chromosomal Adam?
How far the generations from beginning to them?
No, in years.
In years.
Yeah, you know my answer. Roughly about 7,000 years or so.
No,
They lived.
they
They
actually
lived.
both lived over 100,000 years ago.
And how do you know that?
Yes, and they lived 60,000 years apart.
So we know
Okay,
because
how do you?
well, first of all, we can track DNA haplogroups, and what we see is that all of our haplogroups trace back, or our haplogroups trace back to Africa. So our common ancestor was in Africa, and you can tell based on molecular clocks. We can look at the approximate mutation rates in humans, and we can trace back. We can see that in the Y chromosome and in mitochondrial DNA. And we can trace
Okay,
those back.
so you're starting with the assumption that humans came from apes, and you're applying that to the mutation rates, which is how
No,
you determine how long they are, or what?
no, okay. Y chromosomal Adam and mitochondrial Eve were both humans. They were both the same species as us. They were Homo sapiens. We trace them using, remember, our mitochondrial DNA haplogroups and molecular clocks, and and that has nothing to do with us being related to chimps or anything else. That's just tracing those two back.
Okay, those solely those two back to,
And they were
and then
humans.
yes, they were humans. Okay.
That has nothing to do with assuming anything about chimps or whatever. So again, we use that same method, and you can extrapolate backwards, and you can see. And sometimes, in very rare cases, like I said with Neanderthals, we can get bits of DNA from Neanderthal fossils, and we can look and compare our DNA to theirs. And what we see is that they were a separate species from us, but we had limited interbreeding with them, which is why people of European descent have somewhere between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. And people of Southeast Asian descent had limited interbreeding events with this other species of humans called the Denisovans. So,
Okay, hang on, and then, oh, hang on, let me, because I remember I was gonna revert back to what we were talking about relatedness, okay, and I'm trying to get to you. I'm trying to explain to you guys that there is a level of what you can see between, or like in the same species, like humans to humans, the same way you date, or you can tell humans are related or not. You're using the same human genome sequence in a way. You're using the same availability of what you see in a human. Okay, you see a different DNA pattern, you see a different like build. You see an ape is a totally different build, and another animal is a totally different type of DNA animals and stuff.
What's the difference in build?
What's the difference? Well, you see that in their DNA. Like for instance, the whatever the 60 whatever.
That's what I don't see. That's why I'm asking you. What's the difference in build? Do apes have 2 legs?
No, and built like their DNA sequence. Yes, they have 2 legs, but they have like hands.
Do they
hands
have 2 arms and a head and a nose and a mouth and 2 eyes and 2 ears?
and a brain and stomach and intestines. Why do they have all the same parts that we do?
Okay, not because they didn't, and not because they came from us. That's for sure. They have them because they were
no, they didn't come from us. We didn't come from.
Well, not be, yeah,
either.
I know.
So why do we have all the same? Why do we have many hundreds of the same exact parts as they do?
Well, that's because we do, because we have the same. Doesn't mean we're related, but okay. Let me also bring up this. It's not because they have these. Yeah, they have these parts. That if just because they have those parts doesn't determine whether or not we're related.
So remember my example with the family in Milan. Do you think that each generation is independently creating the new mutation in the exact same place, or do you think they're inheriting it from their ancestors, from their parents?
They're inheriting their same DNA. They're inheriting the same. Oh, I'm not sure what you're asking. Yeah,
they're inheriting that mutation from their parents in the same way that they're inheriting their arms, their legs, their head, eyes, nose, stomach, etc. from their parents.
And do you know?
And we can
Jackson,
make.
And do you know how many?
Jackson, if I cross a boundary, you'll have to put me down because I'm the moderator. But I might have a question that would clear up a couple of things.
Okay.
So Isaiah, you accepted that tigers and lions and mountain lions and house cats are the same kind. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, you broke up. I'm assuming you said are related.
Yes.
You asked me if they are related, and I'm gonna tell you. Like I said now.
It's a hold on. It's a yes or no question. Did they have a common ancestor?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Like I said, I don't study that.
You said yes to that.
Yeah, I said to what I would tell you. What I would tell you is yes, based on what I briefly read.
They are all
what I would
cats.
tell you is yes. Don't hold it to me.
They're all cats, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Oh, that's a human classification.
Hold on. So, great apes and humans. Why are they not the same kind?
What?
And why are all cats the same kind? What's the mechanism you use to make a distinction between those two groups?
Yeah, that's a good question.
How
would
did
say
you- how did-
Peter, let him answer. Let him answer.
Yes,
I would say
I wanted to specify just a little bit. How did you determine that all cats are the same kind, and how did you determine why apes and humans are not the same kind? What mechanism do you use?
Okay. For apes and humans, I would say why not? I would say lack of evidence. For like felines and felines, which feline is a human classification. It's
irrelevant.
It's a human classification. But
it's irrelevant.
Well, it is in general. How do you classify these things? How do you classify what is a what? And that's what you're asking me. I'm assuming how do you classify they are related?
Yes. Why are they related?
And I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you. That's one of my bucket list. Well,
I can tell you why. They are related because we understand that genetics and morphology are inherited. These are inheritable traits, and they are passed down with variations, and then that is acted upon by the environment.
Well, genetics. Those are genetic boundaries, but
there's no genetic boundary. Okay, you would have to tell me what the genetic boundary is, because that's not really a thing that you hear outside of creationist literature.
Well, you guys admit that you use mutations to get to one of these things. So why would they need a mutation?
But you also acknowledge that mutations occur.
So
earlier,
Isaiah, what I was trying to express is that using the exact same method, genetics, we can determine that all cats are related. With exactly the same method, we can prove that humans and apes are related. So, what I'm curious about is why you would accept this method in one, as you call it, kind, and don't accept it in another kind. What's different between those two?
That's okay.
Because we are using the exact same evidence to prove that humans are apes.
Okay, you kind of broke up. You said
we're using the exact same evidence to prove that humans are apes as we do that lions and tigers are cats.
Wait, Peter, Isaiah, can you hear us?
Yeah, you guys are breaking up really bad. I think I got the gist of the question. You said, why would I accept that that cats are related and not humans are related to apes?
Because we're using the exact same method for both.
We're using the exact same method and the exact same evidence to determine it. So why do you accept the evidence in cats and reject the evidence in apes?
Okay, go ahead, Isaiah. Okay, every time you speak, it breaks up a little bit, but okay, here's my answer. So I'm gonna, I disagree that it's the exact same method because you are going to assume that these mutations occurred. You're gonna assume that. Can you see them? No, because you don't have the transitional fossils to do them. You're gonna assume they came from one another. And why would there even be a mutation if there was not a genetic boundary? You're going to assume that came from this.
Isaiah, that wasn't the question.
You didn't answer the question.
That wasn't the question. The question is, why do you accept the evidence in cats and reject the exact same evidence in apes?
That's the whole question. That's it.
Because,
right there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because cats don't need mutations to turn into another cat.
They do.
That's why. No.
All organisms do. They're the exact same process that occurred.
That's not the definition of a mutation.
So you know
what a mutation is? It's when you have.
Can you distinguish a tiger from a house cat?
Can I distinguish what?
Can you tell the difference between a tiger and a house cat?
Sure.
Why?
Well, you can base on observation. You can base on even genetics in general.
So we can look at the genetics in this case, but not in other cases.
You can look at the genetics, but you can't make up that the mutations that happen to them, or what you claim to happen.
So would you say house cats are related to tigers through genetics?
Yeah, to my knowledge, yes, without mutation too.
So the process that split the ancestor of tigers from the ancestors of house cats is the literal exact same process that occurred splitting the ancestors of humans the ancestors of chimps, you had variation and mutation, which
Oh,
I've
really?
already explained, and then nature acts on those, natural selection, and then over time you get speciation. Literally the exact same process.
Okay.
This is observable. We can observe that speciation happens and it occurs in this way, and we can observe that genetic changes, are inherited, like we saw in the family of Milan, Italy.
Okay.
So we know.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, I noticed you slipped in mutation there. Do you think we need a mutation for a cat to turn into another cat? Do you think
Very
that's a
likely.
needed mutation?
I mean,
Very likely.
because
So there's no way, like
house cats and tigers are two different species descended from a different
the cat. They came from a cat, a common cat.
from
That just
some
happened to.
species of cat, some genus of cat. Yes.
Oh yeah, like a mutt. Well, actually, the other ones are mutts, but
No, it wouldn't be a mutt because it's not a combination or a cross
That's what I'm
between
saying.
them.
Yeah, the other one. Everything else would be a mutt because that's like the original feline. But it
Not-
doesn't take a mutation to go down or up. It's just
It
that's
does.
just the way microevolution. You're arguing microevolution for proof, as in the assumptions of macroevolution.
Do you know
Where do
what
you
the
find those
definition?
mutations?
Do you know what the definition of microevolution is?
Put simply, it's basically the interbreeding and the different breeds of kinds, like not to the level of speciation. Just
So
different
the
variation.
definition, right? The definition of microevolution is genetic change below the level of species. So do you know what the definition of macroevolution is?
Honestly, it varies from discussion to discussion. The way we would use it is what we cannot observe.
No,
What
the
we
general
cannot observe between them.
definition is genetic change at or above the level of species. When you open up a biology textbook, that's pretty much what it will say. Go to Wikipedia, go to dictionary.com. It's pretty much the same.
Okay.
Genetic change
And
at
then-
or above the level of species. And so so this process of genetic change at or above the level of species includes speciation by definition. Therefore, speciation is macroevolution by definition.
Okay, by definition.
So the origin
Yes.
of new genera, etc., is also by definition macroevolution, even though genera are these are man-made classifications. The only thing we can actually see directly is species, but speciation is a macroevolutionary event. So it's not just something that's in the dark and distant past and we can't see it. We can only infer it. We actually can observe speciation.
Okay, and then by observing speciation, that means, well, didn't you say earlier that's like when one species cannot interbreed with another, like when they come too far apart?
Generally, yes. That's what speciation. That's a very basic explanation of speciation.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So in that aspect, then yes, it can, because it's pushing. Like I'm gonna stop using micro and macro because the point doesn't seem to get across. It's only the technicality of it. Okay, I'm gonna start saying the non-mutationary relation.
There are no
Right
non-mutation.
there, the non-mutationary relation between
no such
species.
things. There's no such thing.
Yes. Okay. What do you define as mutation? Because a mutation, you can get something totally different. You can get a dog that doesn't even look like another dog without mutation. That's just genetics.
No, that still requires variation and mutation. Mutation is a change in a nucleotide, in the sequence of nucleotides.
Mutation is not. Well, no, you're mixing. What is it? Variation is not mutation. It can be mutation. Can be variation.
I agree that variation is not inherently mutation. I wasn't confusing the two, but I'm saying that there are no examples of your mutations are inevitable. You're not going to have them because your DNA polymerase is imperfect. So you're going to get mutations whether you want them or not, even if you're a trained, the best dog breeder or cat breeder in the world, you're still going to get mutations. They're still going to happen. And in nature, they're definitely going to happen because, again, DNA polymerase is imperfect, and you've got environments working on the variations, and mutations are also occurring. And so that's where the genetic that's where the genetic pool comes from that the environment is acting on, and then the ones that are helpful to the organism will get selected for, and the ones harmful will get selected out.
Okay, so again, you are assuming that mutations happen to get one thing to another. Now,
That's
let
a
me tell
very
you, how often do you think these mutations occur? And because you get
all
like
the
a
time.
chicken with the teeth, and you got professional scientists trying to keep it alive, and
That's not the
keep
point of that experiment.
keep like that species that thing on in
That's not the
general.
point of that experiment. So
Well,
the point of the chicken with teeth is they were looking at the genes involved in the craniofacial region that code for teeth. They're looking at retroengineering and that sort of thing. That's not about keeping them alive in the same way that breeding, wingless
do you think they could
flies.
have?
It doesn't. It's not the point. I probably not, but that's not
Okay.
the point of it. The point of it is looking at what genes are involved in these processes. That's the point. In the same way that the work with Drosophila, where you have wingless Drosophila, the point was never to release them back into the world and
Well,
see if they
okay,
survive. The point was what
okay.
genes are involved in regulating the development of these organisms, the Hox
Okay.
genes.
Well, okay. Before I forget, okay, 2 points. So if they couldn't keep it alive, what makes it able to be alive naturally before? And then the other point is, oh, I think I lost my train of thought. Uh, Oh yeah, and the other point is, yeah, you have these like the reason I said DNA is a language of chemicals or whatever. I guess you can say, as Peter would
Okay.
mention, you could put that as you can make anything with it, pretty much. If you have all the right things, you can give it anything, teeth, anything, and of course it takes a lot of trial and error. You know how many embryos they end up killing. You could do anything almost with DNA.
I mean, but
You can develop almost anything.
that's
It's
irrelevant
very
to
complicated,
evolution, though.
which is why that. No, they could. So how does that show relatedness if you can do anything with it? It doesn't. It's
That
just
doesn't
showing
make any
that yeah,
sense.
they did it.
You can't do that with all organisms. You can't give a plant teeth, for instance. You can't just take out a section of DNA from one organism that codes for teeth, put it into another one,
Well,
and
because it
expect
needs
it to
other
be.
genetic, and yeah, well, because it needs other DNA to build upon that. It
To
needs
your
you need
first,
to, and it's not a living.
to answer your first question, it was never about keeping these organisms alive.
Well, in
It was
general,
all
yeah, I
about
get that.
okay. So it's there are no. They're not trying to make chickens with teeth to see that these things survive out in the wild or wingless Drosophila or whatever. It's all about just identifying genes. So it's not about them surviving. And for the other one, I'm not sure what you mean. That's not really an issue anyone's concerned with because we can understand how mutations and variations are inherited. So if you have one organism and it has, it doesn't have some section of gene, and then you find another one that has this totally novel section, it's like that's going to be kind of weird, and that would really puzzle a lot of people, but they would probably be able to figure it out. That's not really an issue in evolutionary biology. In evolutionary biology, we understand how variations and mutations are inherited, acted upon by the environment, and species diverge. And that is the base. That is the process of evolution in and of itself. It's very basic,
Okay,
but that's it. That's all it requires. And so
okay,
you just
and then two things. Okay, so back for 1 second for the chicken. Well, I think they were claiming what that the Velociraptor and chicken are related or something, which would probably provoked idea for why would they would think it would be able to have teeth and
because
whatnot.
uh,
And then
I mean, yes, velociraptors are related to chickens. Birds are Maniraptor and theropods. So
okay, well then other than the other point before I forgot, you were talking about I lost my train of thought. You were talking.
well, okay,
Oh,
well,
observed. Yeah. Do you so? And I understand you gave me some examples of what they plant. You gave me some examples of the mutations being occurred and carried on.
mm-hmm.
I'm demanding evidence for the more notorious of what they've heard, and understand that if things like this can happen on a lower spectrum, which is why I don't know a lot about bug mutations, about bugs changing into insects or plants into plants. Because think about it. Well, come Noah's flood, which they could have survived. Plants, the Earth is only covered in 150 year days of water, so the plants could have survived. But did those plants turn from plants to plants? I'm not an expert on. I wouldn't know. Same thing with insects. I wouldn't know. I didn't look into that because everything I do here is for my free time. But I'm talking about evidence for, and not just transitional fossils as they claim, because that's fossils can be misinterpreted as well. Anything can be. You can make your own animal with a fossil.
I mean,
And then
possibly
also,
yes, but do you know why people consider certain fossils transitional? I don't really like that word, but it's
to
useful
fit the
here.
narrative, yes. Yeah,
So it has nothing to do with the actual anatomical character traits of the organism itself.
Well, okay, hang on, because I also wanted to like talk about a thing. Speaking of fossils, well, okay, so hang on. Are we gonna just? Do you want to strictly stay on this topic? I'm gonna kind of go into the millions of years and evolutionary aspect of how they would have if there was fossils.
You still never explained why it's okay to say cats are all related to each other, but not humans and chimps. That was something we never got resolved, because even though we're using the exact same method, and we can make verifiable predictions based on it, like the fusion in chromosome 2.
I did answer, okay, because humans to humans, you don't need a mutation from
You do.
whatever to that.
It
No,
does happen.
you don't. That's variation. That's you already have DNA.
Isaiah,
you and me already have DNA for so many more different sequences.
Isaiah, I have to jump in because you're not answering the question, and you're not being honest. What was asked? What was asked of you is, why do you accept the method and the evidence that ties all cats together as having a common ancestor? Why do you accept that? And why do you deny the exact same method and the exact same evidence we get when it comes to humans and apes?
It is not the exact same method. That's why.
It is the exact same method.
It is. And you can ask us this, you can ask a geneticist this, they're going to tell you the exact same thing.
And I have a follow-up question. So if you want to learn about let's say genetics, where do you go? Where did your knowledge of genetics come from?
Okay, hang on. Okay, so for your first point of
let's skip the first point, because you've already answered that. So your knowledge of genetics, where does that come from? Where do you go to learn about genetics?
Okay, well, to my understanding, do you want me to explain it to you, or you want me to know like my source? Because
what are your sources for most of your claims?
Okay, all right, and I had a feeling this was going to come up, so let me tell you now. All right, I forgot to tell this at the beginning. I made a point too, but I forgot. Truth is not relative to anything, right? You guys agree? Truth is truth. It could be.
So that's not an answer to the question. What?
No, Peter, he's getting to that. Hold on. Go ahead, Isaiah.
Yeah. So truth is truth. It can be on a piece of toilet paper. It can be on anything. All right. Truth is truth. All right.
Are you trying to soften us up to say you get your stuff from AIG?
What?
Okay, just go ahead.
Okay. I would say to that, a lie is a lie, whether it's written on toilet paper or in a Bible.
Regardless,
sure. But the Bible doesn't have lies, so
just
the Bible has multiple lies.
Guys, this is irrelevant. This is irrelevant, Peter. This is irrelevant.
We'll talk about that on your show.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But
so Isaiah, what is your source?
What is your source?
Okay. Multiple sources. I've shown you. AIG is my possibly favorite. Is creationist. Yeah, I know.
I am actually in the process of reading the Answers in Genesis book right now, and they are atrocious when it comes to their claims on genetics. They are wrong.
Jackson.
Okay.
Can I make just a quick analogy?
Go ahead, Peter.
We had some tech problems when we started the show. So Isaiah, when your computer is broken, do you take it to a bike shop?
You take it to a computer shop. You don't take it to a bike shop.
Why don't you do the same with science? Why don't you get your science from scientists?
Say that again. Because okay. This brings up a good point, and I definitely wanted to go over this in the discussion. Okay, so you are using science to try to further your claims or interpretations.
No,
No.
I asked a distinct question. Why don't you get your science from scientists?
Why don't you go to
Because-
Google Scholar to read about stuff, or even Wikipedia?
So-
Heck,
Because
That's
for
such
your,
a trick
for your computer, you wouldn't go to a bike repair shop. Although a bike repair shop would know everything about bikes. That
'cause that's a trick question.
that would be the best place to get your bike repaired. So why don't you take a computer there?
Okay, I know what you're getting at. Listen, okay. There is nothing unscientific because okay, they're not gonna. So creationists, okay, they're nothing unscientific about it. What makes it unscientific? It doesn't make. It's not false. No one has more or less facts.
no, it is absolutely because when you read, if you, I guarantee you can do this and you'll have a lot of fun, or just tear your hairs out. Either way, I've done both. Is that when you read? Hold on, Peter. I just want to make a point. Is when you read the work, the technical work by Answers in Genesis, and you compare it against what actual researchers in the field say, 10 out of 10 times, the people at AIG are wrong about their arguments. Georgia Purdom.
I can do better.
Yes,
I can do better.
Georgia.
I can prove to your satisfaction, Isaiah, that one of the so-called scientists of Answers in Genesis is lying to you.
Okay. All right.
Well,
I can prove that. I can prove that.
Peter, I'm not even worried about. I'm not even worried about them lying or anything like that. I just Isaiah, do you fact check their claims?
What I was trying to get at is that
Yes,
he
look.
says in words that cannot be mistaken that he is lying about evolution, and he has to do so because otherwise he would have to reject the Bible, which he cannot do. But he is acknowledging that he is lying about it. If I can produce that evidence from the guy's very own website, would you believe it? And I could link the guy because he was in the Answers in Genesis movie, Is Genesis History?
Okay, and are you referring to the beginning statements in which they say, and that's not lying, are you referring to the beginning statements in which they say, if there was, which they never admit there was, they say if there was evidence.
That's not what he's talking about. There's a guy, what he's talking about.
It's not that, okay, well.
No, he's talking about Todd Wood, who is one of the Answers in Genesis authors, who has admitted on his blog, a very popular article running around different circles, that he does acknowledge that evolution is indeed true. And he's not the only one.
I acknowledge it too. It is. Not to the extent you guys claim, but it is. Change over time exists.
No, he acknowledges deep time common ancestry. But he says he rejects it because he thinks the Bible is more important. He rejects what he understands, which is evolution. He understands it's true because he doesn't want it to interfere with his beliefs on the Bible. He just comes out and says that, and it's very easy to find. I've actually probably referenced it in a video or two, but I think Peter can also grab you the link.
I already have the link. I'll send it to you, Jackson, so you can put it in the description for people who are watching the video.
Okay.
And I'm sending it now to Isaiah on Twitter as well, so he can check it out. That we're not lying, and it's actually Todd Wood's blog.
Then Todd must be very uneducated in how
he's not.
sees things.
No, Kurt Wise is the same way. Kurt Wise is a geologist who studied under I think it was Stephen Jay Gould, who was a famous paleontologist. Kurt Wise similarly realized either he can accept the old age of the earth and all that stuff, or the Bible. And so he rejected what he knows about the earth because he thinks the Bible is more important.
All right, now I can play this same game too. Okay, do you know Colin Patterson? Dr. Colin Patterson?
No.
Director of British Museum of Natural History, okay, concerning transitional fossils. He's supposedly highly well-known and highly respected evolutionist. and they asked them about transitional fossils in the museum.
The quote that there are no transitional fossils.
Oh, it's the
And
quote mine.
he said,
Actually, here it is. I found the quote mine. I
he
fully
said,
is
okay,
it. I fully agree with your comments.
what? No. Dr. Patterson? Well, Dr. Patterson said, if I knew of any fossils or living, I would have included it. I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil for which one
might make a watertight argument. Yeah. Yeah, it's a quote mine. There's actually a whole page on Talk Origins about it. He's quote mine. Because he goes on to say, I decided to get to, this author says, I decided to get to the bottom of the matter. The quote is from a personal letter dated 10th April 1979 from Dr. Patterson to creationist Luther Sunderland, and is referring to Dr. Patterson's book Evolution. My first step was to read the book. I believe it is now out of print, but most university libraries should have a copy. Anyone who has actually read the book can hardly say that Patterson believed in the absence of transitional forms. For example, page 131 to 133, in several animal and plant groups, enough fossils are known to bridge the wide gaps between existing types, and he goes on talking about horses and Devonian amphibians and Archaeopteryx, etc. So that is what you call a quote mine, because
what then? Why would he proclaim such a thing in I think it was an interview? Why would he say such a thing, and then why would that make it invalid? To what? Do you think it's just a change of heart midway, or in the same sense of whatever the creationist?
It's a quote. A quote mine is a quote out of context, where the context determines the actual position of the person who made the quote.
Like the one of the most famous examples of a quote mine is the Darwin I quote, where he says, it's should be considered insuperable to our imagination that natural selection could have produced the eye, and creationists will just take that quote and throw it up everywhere. But actually, but that just demonstrates they've never actually read Origin of Species, because literally the next two lines are, but then if mutations can be inherited and naturally selected, and you can get better and better and better, then it's not insuperable to the imagination at all. And he goes on to explain different types of eyes in the animal kingdom and things like that. And so yeah, that's a quote line. The difference is you can go and look at Todd Wood's own words on him accepting evolution. You can look at his own words. You don't have to take our word for it. And you can go see what he says. And
you've seen whatever atheist evolutionists turn to creationism? You've seen that, right? Everywhere, you've seen that, right? There are hundreds, I'm sure.
I don't care what people, how many people do it. The issue really is the data here, and the scientists at Google Scholar.
Well, that's the same reason.
No, it's really not. The scientists at Google Scholar they're not lying to you. What they're doing is they are publishing data. Their data is being peer reviewed by other scientists, and other scientists are trying to poke as many holes in their data as possible. They are trying to completely invalidate it. And when they fail to invalidate it, at least for the time being, that work is published. And we build our knowledge on what makes it through peer review. Creationists do not have a system of peer review, because when actual scientists, and you can look online, people reading. So do you not remember the extensive list of peer-reviewed for intelligent design that you somehow read and debunked in 15 minutes? None of those were peer-reviewed. The places they were published, they don't just publish peer-reviewed works. ResearchGate, for instance, will publish non-peer-reviewed works like Jeffrey Tompkins' 2013 paper on the chromosome 2 fusion, which has been subsequently debunked by a whole lot of people.
Okay, so you're claiming none of those are peer-reviewed?
Those, the ones you sent me, I don't think so.
Yes.
In fact, if we sent them to geneticists, then I do not think they would survive very well. Oh, really? We have a geneticist in the chat. He says some of the papers are peer-reviewed, but they don't support ID. Intelligent design is not peer-reviewed, nor is it science.
Okay, that's his claim or interpretation.
So the guy, Rational Mind, he's actually a geneticist. It's not his interpretation. He's actually working in the field.
Okay, listen. Okay, so your starting point is that there is no God. Will you
No,
admit that,
that's
or that there is no
irrelevant.
intelligent design? Intelligent design. There's no intelligent design.
Intelligent design is a positive claim. Positive claims require positive evidence. I didn't just say
And
evolution must be true, so let me look for evidence to substantiate it. I didn't accept evolution. I haven't always accepted evolution. I accepted it once I reviewed the evidence for it and determined that is the best explanation.
Okay. So are you personally willing to accept if there was evidence, or if you were faced with evidence for intelligent design?
Yeah, I would have to. I would have to.
Really?
Immediately.
You'd have to get it peer reviewed, though, which is the problem because that's why creationists and intelligent designers have their own journals, so they don't have to go through the normal channels to get their intelligent design or creationist work published. They can just whip up a paper and put it in one of their journals and never have it seen by actual scientists. That's the whole reason that they do that.
Okay, well,
it's completely in-house.
So today's your lucky day then, because you're also claiming that it. Yeah, you're also claiming it probably isn't, but you're also claiming that truth is relevant to whatever classification. If it's true,
I'm sorry. If something is objectively verifiable, then it's true. Yes.
Okay, and then
so I have a different definition. True is what you can demonstrate to be true, what you can demonstrate to be real.
Okay. Can you demonstrate that we came from monkeys? Not just claim to observe. Can you demonstrate? Yes. Yeah. Tell me how.
We've already done it. We've explained genetics, and actually, here's. I'll tell you about it later. Thanks, Russian. Well. So yes, through genetics and morphology, we've already explained, we understand how variations are inherited and passed on, and then these things can be naturally selected. That's all evolution.
We can demonstrate it in the exact same way that we use to demonstrate that lions and tigers and house cats are related.
Yes.
No, it's not the same way. It's not the same way.
It's exactly the same way. You can keep saying it isn't, but you're wrong.
You can keep saying it is, but you're wrong.
Because we know that it is, because we've read. Because I personally have read papers on it.
So Isaiah, we can present you with the evidence. Present us with evidence that it is a different method. What is different in those two methods?
So what is different between, what is different is, I've already said, and you claim that it needs mutation.
No, hold on. That wasn't my question. What is the difference in methods where we determine that cats, lions, and tigers are the same, have the same common ancestor, and where we determine that apes and humans have a common ancestor? What's the difference in method?
The assumption.
What's the assumption?
What assumption?
The assumptions made because, like I said before, you can use.
Hold on.
Listen. I'm answering your question.
Wait, Peter, I'm interested to hear what.
You're deflecting.
No, it's not deflecting.
You're deflecting because we don't use assumptions, and I asked you to point out the difference in the method that we used. If you say that we use a different method, then you can point out where the method differs. And that has nothing to do with assumptions. It's a method.
Yes. Okay.
So where's the method different?
So the way you determine the way the method is variable, is that you can take animals and you can transition fossil them. Okay, you can see that. You can test the DNA on that. That works.
Ignore the fossils.
Not fossils, but animals. Okay. Transitional animals, I should say. Okay, transitional animals.
So you're just looking at modern animals.
You can take them, yes, and transition them, and it doesn't need a mutation. Okay. Well, why would it? You're saying it's the same, and you're asking me, hey, why would it be the same? Why would it be the same? You're saying it's the same. Why wouldn't it be the same? And I'm telling you, it's the fossils, the interpretation. It's not the same. You can't
No,
have
it's-
We didn't ask you about fossils or interpretation.
the animals.
We asked
Okay,
you
so-
about the difference in method.
where
Do you know what we mean by method?
and I
Yes.
have to say, where did you get the idea that there are no mutations involved? Where did you get that idea?
I never said there are no mutations. There are no observed mutations, and there's no way to prove they are. You're saying you can prove it. You're
We
saying
can
it's
demonstrate that
backed up by
mutations
evidence.
do occur and they are inherited. I gave you a number of examples earlier.
Okay, not from what you claimed of humans to apes or animals to like
We don't
the
have
feline
the
comparison.
common ancestor of humans and apes, of humans and chimps, for instance, around alive right now. Nor do we have the common ancestor of house cats and lions around right now. But you seem to think that they are indeed related through genetics and morphology, which is what we are saying is the same. We think it is for the exact same reasons, genetics and morphology, that we are related to chimps and gorillas, etc. There is no change here.
Human chromosome 2.
Yeah, that was a prediction that we made. The existence of
That's a
fusion.
mutation.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a mutation between after the common ancestor between humans and chimps that occurred, and we predicted it. Not only did it happen, we predicted it in advance based on the concept that we share a common ancestry with chimps.
So you predicted that, okay? You predicted that you predict that would have happened, and if it did, it would have happened, and if we can prove it did happen, it did happen. Because like what? There's no reason people are not to believe that God didn't use evolution, but it's just not true. It's just not true because of all the assumptions and
That's not the point.
The ideas like if this, it's like you can't get a right answer when starting off.
Isaiah, that's not the point. The point is that we made a prediction.
Isaiah, sorry, as the moderator, this was one of your best deflections ever.
Okay,
Explain.
Okay, no, I'm not.
Okay,
Isaiah,
guys, can I talk?
explain chromosome 2. What do I mean when I say chromosome 2?
So what you said?
Do you
there
know what we mean when we say chromosome 2 in humans? Do you know what that means?
Chromosome 2. That is the one of the 23 pairs, right? In human. Well, what do you mean? It changes.
What's the difference? What's the big difference between chromosome 1 and chromosome 2?
People typically have like 2 copies of this one rather than the other ones?
No. So I'll explain what happened. So basically, the other great apes have 24 pairs of chromosomes, whereas we have 23. The reason for that, the researchers predicted, was 2 of our pairs of chromosomes. They didn't just disappear because that would have been lethal. They must have fused. Two chromosomes, because the telomeres are at the ends, they crashed into each other end to end, and that became our chromosome 2. And we still can see the remains of the telomeres and of the centromeres. We predicted, based on common ancestry with other apes, that this was the case. There is no reason why we should have a telomere fusion in chromosome 2 unless we descended from a common ancestor with other great apes that also had 24 pairs of chromosomes. This was a verifiable prediction we made in advance.
So you made. Okay, so you're saying that you guys see the fusion as today, right?
You can
Yes,
see it.
you can take a look at it. I mean, there are whole bunches of studies on it.
You don't have to be a geneticist to go and watch the evidence and be convinced, because you can see it.
Okay. Now then, think about since things evolve, okay, or supposedly evolve, how does that new information get processed, get created to like new animals, like to humans? Do you develop it?
It's not about new information. It's telling you that there was a mutation where 2 chromosomes fused, and we can see that they fused, and the evidence that they fused is still there in you.
That's an assumption that they ever.
No,
No,
that
that's
ever
not
happened.
We
that's
can
not
see
an
it.
assumption.
You
That's
can't
not
see
an
that it
assumption.
happened. No, yeah, you can't see that. You can see maybe that it can happen, but you can't see that it did happen.
No,
You
actually,
can?
we can because we can see that we have the evidence. We have the telomeres of this fusion event still inside of us. The remains of the telomeres from this event. It's not an assumption. We're not. It's not like it doesn't actually exist, and we're just trying to pull the wool over your eyes. You can go look up the information on it. This was a verified.
It's as easy. So Isaiah, have you ever seen a Siamese twin?
Hey, what?
A Siamese twin.
No, not to my knowledge.
So a Siamese twin is actually two humans sharing one body.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how can you tell the difference between a human and a Siamese twin?
How can just based on looks, you say, or what? In general, what difference? In general, is there any difference?
Is there what's the difference between the two?
Well, you can test the genetics, like you said. This you can test. You can see. Well, besides looking, you can see that there are clearly two bodies, and that was Amy. That was.
Can you see? So, for instance, can you see there were Siamese twins that had one pair of legs but two bodies?
Can you see that?
Could you see the difference? Could you see if you just looked at them that they had two bodies?
Yes, of course. Or wouldn't you be able to?
And so you would make the difference between a Siamese twin and a normal human that the difference was that they had two bodies but just one pair of legs, right?
Yes.
Because you know where a normal human ends and where it begins, right? It begins, if I don't care which way you start, let's say you start at the head, it will end at the feet, right?
Sure.
And if that doesn't happen, if it's fused with a different human along the way, you can see that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, chromosomes have a distinct beginning and ending. In chromosome 2, we can see that a beginning and an ending have fused. You can see that. Even knowing nothing about genetics, it can be made visible to you so you can see it. It's also twice as long. Would that be an indication for you to say, hey, yeah, that used to be two parts and now it's one? They grew together.
Okay, and you're saying
That's a yes or no question.
wait. What do you ask? You asked, would that be an indication?
Yes.
If you could see one chromosome and then another chromosome that's twice as big and had a beginning and an ending fused, and people could show that to you, could you then determine that, hey, maybe in the past those were two and they grew together, just like Siamese twins do?
You can interpret it that way. Yeah.
Okay.
When you see the Siamese twins, are you interpreting that
Yes.
that they
No,
grew
well,
together?
you see that.
Do you need to interpret anything to see a Siamese twin and then determine that those are two humans sharing one body, or at least connected at some point along their bodies?
Look, okay. First, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm saying it could.
Do you know that there are Siamese twins that were
produced offspring? I don't think so.
No, that were completely separate but were joined at the head.
At the head? Oh, I'm not aware of any that were joined at the head.
Okay, so if you
sometimes.
would see two different humans and their heads were joined together, could you see that was slightly different than other humans would look like?
Yes, yes, you would see that they difference.
Okay, exactly the same thing happens in chromosome 2. You don't need any knowledge of genetics. You can see the beginning and the ending, and then see that there's one chromosome that has a beginning and an ending that is fused.
Okay,
You
so
don't need any knowledge. If you have two parts of metal and they get welded together, you can see that they are welded together. You don't know, you don't need to know how welding works, right?
okay, yeah, well, yes, well,
And
clearly,
that's how clear chromosome number 2 is.
We
Even a layman can see that it's two chromosomes joined together in a way that it is found nowhere else.
so we're probably gonna run this about 15 more minutes and then we'll end it. Okay, does that sound fine,
Yeah.
guys?
okay.
So
Yeah.
so
And
this
then as a,
chromosome 2. So do you think it's just a coincidence that we were able to make the prediction based on common ancestry that we would have fused chromosomes? Do you think that's just a
I
coincidence?
I think you would need more than that because I think also you see those twins fused together. You're making assumptions that okay, if it did happen, okay, and if this was a like a for instance a scar or whatever on humanity, you're assuming that they survived. You never see. In fact, as a matter of fact, they die more frequently. It's you're okay. So there's also two things. You're
Do you
contradicting your own
understand
selves
what
by saying,
you
well,
understand what
yeah,
the concept
these
of
little changes
parsimony is?
happen with population.
You understand what the
Pop-
concept of parsimony is? So in parsimony,
Hello?
it's generally. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Hello? Isaiah?
yeah.
So you understand what the concept of parsimony is?
Parsimony.
Yes.
No, I
Okay.
can't.
So
No.
basically, it's very briefly. It's basically the concept that requires the fewest assumptions is probably the best one. You've ever heard of like
Okay.
yeah, okay. So one the idea that requires the fewest assumptions, it's probably the correct one, at least until evidence comes along to disprove it. Right? So
Okay.
do you think it's more likely that we just so happened to fuse two chromosomes uh and we independently were given 24 pairs instead of 23, just like the other great apes? Do you think we inherited our 24 pairs? Is it more parsimonious to believe that, or is it more parsimonious, which is in accordance with the evidence, or is it more parsimonious to believe that we were independently created with innumerable genetic and morphological similarities with other organisms just for no reason?
Well,
Which of those is more
it's
parsimonious?
it's for a reason. If it was for no reason, then yeah, that would make sense. But it
So
was for a
God
reason.
created us and chimps with over 95% similar DNA, and the
It's not. It's not 95.
it's over 95.
It's
Actually,
no. Actually,
did.
they choose. They pick and choose what they want. They delete copies of DNA. They pick out the.
Do you understand? So you
It's not.
okay? That's how it works. That's how you compare DNA. You can't.
Well,
It's
then
not
you
about
can't.
comparing every single. If you have a sequence that's copied, you're not going to count it twice. Okay, that's how they compare. They
Yeah,
compare
well,
a single
that's what
copy
makes
autosome.
us. That's what makes. Be that to related if it's not even that's clearly what separates us. So you're gonna take away what separates us and call us related? Like what?
No, they completely acknowledge that there are parts that separate us. That's not the point.
Yeah, they acknowledge
The
them
point-
so much that they take them out. Exactly.
No, that's not what that's about either. That's why we have the differences.
Well, clearly.
Anyways, okay, so thus far, I just want to point out that you have not explained why you think it's okay to classify cats together, but not humans with chimps, even though by your own reasoning, cats are classified together, even though we can show by the exact same method through genetics and morphology that we are related to
Only-
other primates and that cats are related to other cats.
Only except you don't need a mutation to get a cat to a cat. You don't need that. But
Well, who says that? Who says that? Can you provide me a source for that?
that you don't need a cat to you don't need a mutation to get a cat to a cat?
Yes, provide me a citation for that claim. I want to know who said. I want to know where in the technical literature it says no mutations were required to go from the common ancestor of house cats with lions to house cats or lions or any cat or any organism. Provide me a technical literature for that.
Okay,
Jackson. If there are no mutations, then what Isaiah now is claiming is that tigers look exactly the same as house cats do, or exactly as big as house cats are. They're exactly the same.
So they have the same. They have the same information in them. It's just not combined.
How did you determine
in the DNA.
that? How did you determine that?
They have it in them.
According to who?
How did you determine
according to
which information they have?
Who's making the claim
you
that
can see? You can test them like the same way you claim you can do genetic testing. They have that information in them.
Who is claiming that house cats have the genetic disposition to have stripes, like a tiger or a mane like a lion? Who's making that claim?
Hold on. So what you're saying, Isaiah, is that you can breed two house cats and get a tiger.
No, because they lost that information. They had it at one point, or I guess.
Hold on.
That's what I'm saying.
So hold on. So there were mutations. You're saying?
No. There was
so what got us from one piece of information to another piece of information if it wasn't a mutation?
Okay, do you want me to explain?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So the beginning, the first two animals, let's say first two felines, first two cats, they have the genetic information for all. See, the way creation, listen. The way creation and evolution work is backwards. You guys claim they develop that as they go along.
Hold on.
Peter, hold on. Peter, hold on.
Hold on. What was the first cat?
We don't know. Well, it was probably fairly in between.
Hold on. If you don't know, how do you know what genetic information it had?
We get a fair idea of it because it had to have been either way.
How do you know?
Because we see feline house cats and you see tigers and lions.
So you are assuming.
Yes, and we creationists admit
why would you assume if you can get evidence?
Well, because you can't get evidence.
Why not?
You can get evidence, and we have evidence.
With that evidence, you need to make interpretations. You need to make assumptions. So therefore, how would you classify it as evidence?
No, you don't.
Yes.
No, you don't. If I have the evidence that cars exist, and I can show you a car, do I need to assume anything that's part of that car? Do I need to assume that wheels exist, or can I just go look at the car and see the wheel?
You don't need to assume when you have in front of you.
Exactly.
Exactly. So do I need to assume? So let's say there are tinted windows. Do I need to assume there are chairs inside, or do I need to just open a door and go look if there's a car seat?
You need to assume, because what if the seats are out? What if they? But that's kind of a bad example. A bad.
No, it's not. He's making a point.
Hold on. If I take you to a car, do you need to assume that it has car seats, or can you just open the door and go look?
You can open the door and go look.
So you don't need assumptions. Right.
You don't need assumptions.
Exactly.
And exactly the same goes for genetics. You don't need assumptions. You look at the evidence and then make conclusions. You don't make assumptions to make conclusions.
You shouldn't, but there's
You don't, and scientists don't.
Look,
you know who do?
Okay, look.
You know the people who do?
Yes, you guys listen.
No.
Okay, let me tell you.
You do because you just told us.
Yes.
You just told us about the very first step.
But there is not the only one. Okay, listen.
You need to assume.
Okay.
Right,
do you know that the first animal, the first creation that got started Do you know that mutated and turned to another thing?
How do you know?
that?
How do
What
you know?
do you know? That's what I'm saying. Yeah, how do you know?
How do you
So,
know?
so
How
just,
do you know
just,
that?
just,
You're the one
just,
asking us the
just
story.
for
Well, that brings up
reference.
a whole nother. That whole. Well, you guys are gonna say I'm deflecting because that brings up a whole nother issue.
No, no.
Isaiah,
Hold on,
Isaiah,
Peter. Hold on. I am sincerely interested in knowing how you came to the information that just a few thousand years ago, somehow there was like a single pair of cats, and that somehow these underwent the variation and mutations, because mutations would have been necessary to
Okay.
create house cats and tigers, because house cats don't have the inherent ability to grow to the size of tigers, nor do they have the stripes for tigers. Similarly, house cats don't have the mane or size of lions inherent in their genetics. They inherited that. The mane of the lions and their size developed from their ancestor, developed after they split from their ancestor.
Okay.
Mutations were absolutely necessary, not just variation, not just a turning on or off for genes.
Right, for you guys, mutations are necessary. Now, listen. Before I got interrupted, let me tell you what the thing is. Okay. So,
Are necessary.
so from this starting, okay. So because what? Okay, I'm
Hold
gonna.
on.
Hang
Hold
on.
No. I want to ask a question about the statement you just made. For you, assumptions are necessary, and I can prove this by letting you answer one single question. You want me to do that? You want me to prove that you are just assuming things?
Okay. Well, let me prove to you guys.
Do you want me to? Do you want me
Peter,
to prove how?
Peter, can you ask him?
No.
Can you ask him once he explains what?
Yes.
The answer to my question.
So
Yes.
what did the first cat look like? How big was it?
Okay. Well, let me tell you what we do know.
Go ahead,
Okay?
Isaiah.
Okay. So what we do know and what we can see, because backwards, is that from the beginning, from the first cat, there was no need for mutations. Let me explain. There was no need for mutations. Okay. Because the animals already had all the genetic variation in them. Okay, so it was not gaining new information from information. How do you know that they were gaining
evidence?
Well,
because we can see it. We can do this thing called. We can compare the genetics. We can do bracketing, biological bracketing. Yes. Where is your evidence that it was inherent? That all these things were inherent to their ancestor?
I would say by what we see today. You see a rare mutation every once in a while. It doesn't mean they didn't have mutations back when they already had all the information, but they didn't get that. They didn't get no information. They may have had mutations, but that's just like strays. So you have all the evidence, all the data, all the DNA sequencing available for whatever conditions, whatever, and then microevolution goes in both ways. They can have more offspring that are smaller. They still have, or might lose. That's why people say, they bring up the strawman. Yeah, you can't get a house cat to a lion. So what? But you can't do that, because when they lose information, they lose that ability.
Well, that's not what I'm asking. Yeah. So there is no evidence. There is no evidence that house cats have the genes for the mane of a lion or the stripes of a tiger.
Of course, because they lost it.
No. Okay. So in humans, for instance, we have an example of a gene that works in our ancestors but doesn't work in us. It's called a pseudogene. It's named gulo. And this gene in other primates allows them to, lemurs, for instance, allows them to synthesize ascorbic acid in their bodies. Our version of the gulo pseudogene, or the gulo gene, is broken. It's now a pseudogene, and it broke in our ancestor with I think with tarsiers, somewhere between 60 and 65 million years ago.
Okay.
Our ancestor broke that. They had a mutation which broke that gene, and that broken gene was inherited, because we know how traits are inherited, and this trait was inherited through all its descendants, which is why all haplorine primates have a broken gulo pseudogene, unless you want to say God broke the gulo gene.
Well, man broke
primates.
Yeah, man broke. When they sinned, a lot of things stopped working. They started eating meat. Their bodies. How do you think we have glasses?
That's not how that works. Because
how do you know that happened? You know it can. Well, you know that. What was it? How do you know that was our ancestor that broke it? How do you know?
How
that?
do we
Quite-
know?
quite
Because we
easy.
understand
You need
how
assumptions.
traits are inherited. How do you
Quite
know that?
easy. Quite easy. Quite easy.
Yes.
We can actually prove that.
So
It's called
remember,
Really?
it's called hold on. Yes, really. It's called a genetic bottleneck.
you remember our discussion earlier about the man from Milan, Italy, who got the mutation and then passed it to all of his descendants? Each descendant is not independently recreating that mutation. They have inherited it from their parents, and they have passed it down through the generations up to this very day. This is a
Okay.
direct
And you're-
observation. We can directly track this back, and
Yeah.
so
Okay. Observation.
the options are at this point either this gene in the gulo pseudogene was repeatedly broken for tarsiers, old and new world monkeys, all apes and humans, because I guess we're all unrelated somehow, because God decided to do that for
You
whatever
assume.
reason, or we inherit it from a common ancestor, which is by far the more parsimonious
Awesome.
conclusion, especially when we compare our DNA to all the other primates. It is far more parsimonious. It's a far better conclusion.
So, but you're still in your eyes, yes. So you're assuming that happened, and
I'm
if
not
you never
assuming
get
it.
to understand, how are you gonna how are you gonna come to that conclusion that it's parsimonious or whatever? How are you gonna if you never understand?
I already explained how it's more parsimonious because it's broken in the exact same places, and we understand how traits are inherited.
Okay,
So you have to either explain again that tarsiers, old and new world monkeys, and all apes independently broke their gene in the exact same place, or they all inherited it from a common ancestor. The same is true of the family Milan, Italy.
okay,
So either they are each independently creating that new mutation in each individual, or they inherited it. Which is more likely to be true?
okay. Let me tell. Okay, let me now. Now I'm sure you've probably heard the creationist point of view. Do you want me to tell you again?
No,
why
I don't. I
that
want
would
you
have
to answer
happened?
my question.
Okay. I am. Well, what do you mean? What is more
Why?
parsimonious?
Which is more parsimonious for that family in Milan, Italy? That they all inherited it from their ancestor, or that they each individually broke their gene, or had the point mutation in the exact same place? Which is more parsimonious? Which is more likely to be true?
They each had it individually. They both each had it individually broken, not
Wait,
by
what?
each individual. Well, by a mass event, by the fall of man, by the fall of a perfect creation.
No, I am talking about this family that dates back to the early 1900s.
Oh, okay. So you're not.
What?
So you're not. So you're referring to them only, not
I'm not referring to the primates at this moment because I'm trying to draw a comparison.
Okay, I know.
Is it more parsimonious that each one of them independently gained a mutation in this exact same place,
Well, obviously
or
inherited.
that they inherited? Exactly.
Obviously. Well, because that's
So-
what I know, but that doesn't mean you're making assumptions that the apes
apply the
inherited.
literally the exact same logic to the question about the gulo pseudogene with the primates. Literally the
Okay.
exact same logic.
Okay.
Is it more
Okay, save it.
parsimonious that they inherited it, or that they were each independently broke it?
Okay, now listen. Okay, stop. Stay
Yes
right there.
or no?
Okay?
Which is it?
We know. Well, listen. We know that man had the. We know that man was alive. That had a mutation. Okay, we know that. We see that. We saw. Since we know he lived. He lived. You can therefore, say verify it as evidence that they inherited. Do you know that before a common ancestor, as you claim, which you have no proof of, do you know they ever didn't have it, or or what they broke? You know the man existed. Do you know the other thing?
You are applying
infer.
literally the exact same logic, tracing this
No.
mutation to an ancient ancestor. In the case of humans, it was the early 1900s. In the case of the primates, it was somewhere around 60 million years ago. Literally the exact same logic, the same thought process, the same type of event. And you are special pleading because you want all humans to be related to each other, but not to be related to other primates. It's a classic case of special pleading. We can show that we are related to other primates. We can show that all cats are related to each other using the exact same logic. And that is what we've been doing this whole time. What we have been trying to get you to understand is that this whole thing, the whole time, is all the exact same logic, but you're chopping it up into bits and not looking at it as a bigger picture because it's all the same.
Yes,
It's
and to counter that, you admitted that what you base your knowledge on is pure assumption, with no evidence
No,
whatsoever.
not pure. I never said that. I never said that.
Yes,
I
you
said
did
it.
say.
It has,
Hold on. I can hold on.
I did not say
Guys.
Isaiah,
I did not say pure.
hold on. I'll
Okay,
let
he
you
didn't
prove,
say pure evidence.
I'll let you prove different. So, what was the first cat? What did it look like?
Hello?
Isaiah?
Are you there?
Hello?
Hey, we can
Yes?
hear you.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we must have just cut off for a
What
second.
did the first cat look like, and where's your evidence for that?
Okay, evidence. The Bible, what we both know is historically true.
Hold
That's
on.
enough. Hang on.
The Bible doesn't describe the first cat. I want you to describe what the first cat looked like, and where did you get that evidence?
Okay, I couldn't tell you what the first cat looked like. I wasn't there.
So you are assuming.
Sure,
Yes.
sure.
So don't deny that you're assuming.
I
You
never
are
denied that I
assu-
assumed. I
you
denied
are-
that you had.
You are assuming, and every single claim either Jackson or I made can be backed up with scientific papers.
Okay, so do you know what?
Every single one. So
Okay.
why is it that you can't back up anything, have no evidence at all?
I never said that.
Just make an assumption about the first cat and what it looked like and what it's genetically made of. How can you make that claim, have no evidence, and say it's not an assumption?
All right, I want you to answer the same question now, the exact same question
No,
about
I
how do
want-
you know
I
what do you
don't-
look
No,
what do you
I
know
don't
the
want
first cat
you-
looked like?
No,
What do you know the first cat looked like?
no, Isaiah.
No,
I'm not going to let you deflect.
No,
Either you have evidence for the first cat and its genetic makeup, or you don't.
Yes, we have genetic boundaries.
And I'll remind
According
you
to
of the ninth commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Do you have evidence of the genetic makeup of the first cat? Yes or no?
No, and neither do you.
No, because there wasn't a first cat.
Okay. Well, you don't have the evidence for a common ancestor. How do you know?
Yes,
how
we
we
do.
have.
Tell me. How do you
Okay.
know what the first?
We have.
Listen. How do you
We
know what they
have-
look like? The first
We
one?
have.
Now, how do you
Was,
know?
okay, so
No.
Isaiah, there was no first cat.
I know what you claim.
There was no first cat.
Okay. How do you know what the first common ancestor or whatever? How do you know? What besides
We
claim?
can
Without
understand-
claiming? Without
we can understand a number of traits that it would have had based on the similarities of all of its descendants, which we can understand are all
Okay.
related due to, again, morphology and genetics. And so you
so
can
you're
look
still
at,
making claims, and
we
you're
can
attributing that to
demonstrate,
that.
we can demonstrate
You
that
demonstrate what it looks like.
you understand. Remember how I told you earlier that lions and cats are less closely related to each other than we are to chimps?
Yeah, I remember that. That
Okay.
just proves how it
No.
it doesn't make sense. Yes,
No.
it doesn't.
Isaiah, your own admission was that house cats are related to lions. So that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, first of all, I still said that I said they could. I just said I don't know, but I'm still sticking by it. Because they are both still felines by human classification, and by what you can still see, and what we can see in them. But what you can't see is that this thing came from that, and that came from that. You can make assumptions, but you can't see that.
Gang,
So the only reason for you to accept that they are the same is because they look alike?
No,
guys,
no, absolutely not.
Okay. I think we have we've gone on long enough. We've
run past the starting time of our stream, but
I apologize.
That's not a problem because that couldn't be helped this time.
I actually got to pop off. I got things I got to do and stuff, and so
you're going to sell magic water.
A what?
You're going to sell magic water?
Sure, why not?
You said I'm going to pop off.
What?
He sells magic water and prayer cloths.
Oh, pop off. That's right. Okay. Ha ha ha. I forgot about that guy. Anyways, okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for showing up. Yes, even the latecomers. And I want to thank Isaiah and Peter for being here. Good times were had by all. And
Yep.
thanks for coming, everybody. And I will see all of you next time.
Yeah.
Bye.
So hold on.
Oh, okay.
Just a quick one. Shall
Also,
we?
Peter's.
Isaiah, can you do the next stream in about an hour? Is that a problem for you? Hello, Isaiah.
For me, at least, it's 3 o'clock. Hello? Wait, we're cutting off. You saying next hour, like 3 o'clock?
Yes.
For me, it'd be 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
an hour from now, because we already are past our starting time.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so people go
that's
over
fine.
to Gonna Go For It's channel in an hour after this and watch their stream. All right.
All right.
Go do that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.